Hey everybody, we are Martin, Robert, and Francis, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head, rent-free. Hey everybody, welcome back to Snakes and Otters. This is going to be, I don't believe it, a milestone for us, episode 10.
Amen.
Amen, alright, episode 10, way to go us.
Hallelujah, yeah.
So, I'm Martin.
I'm Francis.
And I'm Robert.
So guys, I want to reach back a little bit here. We hinted at this at the end of the last episode, that we wanted to reach back to a few episodes ago when we talked about comic books and the impact on the culture and all that good stuff.
Good palate cleanse.
Yeah. And but I thought there was a piece of that we didn't talk about that would have been fun to go into, especially for you guys, because you know this really hits right in your wheelhouse. But we talked a few of the names, the big names in comic book history. None bigger, of course, than Stan Lee.
Right.
But there's another guy we talked about, but I don't think we gave him his due, and that's Jack Kirby.
The king himself. All hail.
And I've mentioned this before. I walked out of that first Thor movie of the MCU and thought, well, I hope Jack Kirby's family got a huge check. Because everything about that first Thor movie was Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, listeners, if you're not familiar with Kirby's style of comic book art, the costuming, the appearance of Asgard, you know, again, the way the Asgardians look, Loki's helmet with his horns.
Yes.
The idea of a tunnel between Asgard and the Earth from the Bible. That's all Kirby. Every bit of that.
The Rainbow
is Kirby.
Bridge, absolutely.
Yeah, the Rainbow Bridge,
Yes.
the time-space tunnel. That's all Kirby.
Visually speaking.
Visually, yes.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, you could not have drawn Odin to look any more like Anthony Hopkins if you tried. Even though that's not what Kirby did. He
Just created
perfect.
it. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Perfect.
Yeah.
So-
Now, and that does steal in the Thor universe. Stan Lee is taking from, and Kirby too. They're both doing this together. They're taking from mythology. They're really pulling these details out of there. But the visual look is absolutely all Kirby.
Yeah.
Stan really doesn't care. He just wants, let's do the Rainbow Bridge thing, and then Jack takes it.
Yeah. So, listeners, if you're not familiar with Kirby's artwork, you've got to look it up. It's
Go to kirbymuseum.org, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, but there's tons of Marvel stuff from the 60s and 70s.
Oh my God, this man was so
that
prolific.
Jack, and it's so unique.
That's right.
The artwork is unlike anybody else's.
That's right. In fact, there's some that try to copy him even today. Keith Giffen is a good example.
Steve Rude.
That's right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there was only one.
And it's all about action. It's motion.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, motion. See, I'm glad you said that because that was exactly what I was going to lead to. If you look at any page that Kirby drew, and this is the way he drew too. This is the phenomenal thing. He would just start on the upper left corner and just go down the rest of the page, and that's how the action went. Every panel leads you in both time and space across the page with motion, especially the action ones. The action scenes are where you really see this.
That's right. That is his genius.
But characters are always in motion with Kirby. They're always in motion. And just
always doing something.
Yeah,
right.
Just to give you listeners, again, prolific, but just some of the characters he worked on. Captain American Falcon, huge Kirby run.
Yeah, that was late actually. That was his return back to Captain America. Around
his third return to Captain America.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Because you're talking about 76.
Yeah,
right,
76, 77.
Exactly. Yeah, because he did Captain America's bicentennial battles.
Yep.
Which was done in 76, and it was kind of like the beginning of that. It was all original stuff, and basically it says, "Jack, do what you do." He wrote it and drew it and everything.
Yeah.
So it was a different Kirby than was before.
Yeah, there was a
Much more
standalone Black Panther book that was Kirby.
Right.
Yes.
And this was his return to Marvel in the late 70s.
That was 77, 78 also.
Yeah, it's when he came back.
But the Fantastic Four is a Kirby run.
Still his standard in many respects. That's where he really Granted, I don't want to minimize the fact of his contribution before Fantastic Four, because he had been drawing for 15 years.
Yeah.
Before that.
More than that, over 20.
Well, exactly, but the war kind of interrupted some of that.
Well,
yeah, I'm basically speaking from the end of the war on.
Well, even so, though, late 30s.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think he's still doing it.
I think he was. Well, he started in the cartoon shops,
right?
In the animation shops in the early to mid 30s. So he easily had at least 20 years,
right,
even if you take the war out.
Exactly, and he's drawing for comics in the 50s constantly. And most of these are monster comics, things like that.
Science fiction,
lots of that stuff that's going on.
Although he does some romance comics.
He does romance too.
He and Joe Simon, not only do they create Captain America, they create romance comics.
Because he's so prolific. He does it quickly, and it's good every single time. It's very unique.
He did a ton of war comics.
Absolutely. These were all very, very popular at this time.
I remember.
The Losers were later. They were talking I think we're talking the 70s
that was
here.
70s for the Losers.
Well, he created Sergeant Fury along with Stan Lee. Which was a huge. Yeah. And he actually did that.
Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. He
started out that, and he did not ink that. He inked the first issue of that.
Yeah.
And then John Severin came in and inked him for a while, and he eventually hands that over. Eventually it goes to Jim Steranko, who is a great Kirby copyist. He learns in many ways. If you read some of those great S.H.I.E.L.D. stories early on, especially right after, he's inking Kirby. Steranko's inking Kirby for the first few issues. And that's where I think Steranko really picks up on the action you talked about. Because everything is in motion. If you read some of those later issues where Steranko's doing Steranko stuff, it's amazing. Nick Fury's reaching over the top of a car and shooting at people. He's jumping in the middle of the air and doing kicks. That's all Kirby influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just gives you an idea of the scope and the breadth of the things Kirby worked on, and again, why I feel like so much of the visual aspect of the MCU, Kirby's heirs should be getting huge checks from Marvel Studios.
They did get finally they did get a settlement about 10 years ago, I think it was.
Right, yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think it was right before the movies came out, started coming out.
Because they were scared. I think it may have been after the first Iron Man. It was
it's right around that time.
That's right. It may have been before Thor, but it was right around that early time, and they actually put forth a lawsuit saying, wait a minute, we have a stake in the ownership of these characters, and of course Marvel freaked. Because now all of a sudden we're talking real money. We own our own studios, and it's a hit. Yeah. And you're gonna, we've got to come into an agreement with you because we do not want everything.
It was well deserved.
It was well deserved,
I'll tell you this though, because the breadth of these characters,
his heirs picked the right time to bring that suit.
If they didn't get enough. They got what they could, but they did not get enough.
That's correct. There's no question because Kirby Lee and Kirby were absolutely lightning in a bottle. They worked well together, and Kirby on his own could never achieve what he and Lee did together.
Well, he did. I'm hesitant to say could because of
this. He didn't. I don't know. Yeah. Could he have perhaps?
Because when he left to go to DC, it was because he was dissatisfied at Marvel.
Right.
Not just creatively, but also because he didn't have any control, didn't have any ownership, and he couldn't get an actual long-term contract.
Right.
And Kirby was a child of the Depression, okay? So, he grew, and really, even before that, because even in the 20s, he's Jewish, grew up in some of the toughest neighborhoods.
That's right. The Thing is basically Jack Kirby.
He is.
He's creating himself into that character.
And so there's a book called Streetwise. It's a compilation of artists who did stories about growing up in, like gangs and what have you. Kirby's part of a gang because he had to be.
Yeah, the Yancey Street Gang. That's Kirby.
And so,
it's his influence.
He wanted stability for his family.
Yeah, he needs financial
and he couldn't
stability.
get that at Marvel because Martin Goodman was a cheap ass. He really was.
Right.
I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but
and Goodman was the publisher.
The publisher. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. So Kirby, when he went to DC, he had full control, but it was at a time when he had these grand ideas, but also was coming off this great dissatisfaction, and he was looking to prove something, and he really didn't have to prove anything.
Right.
But for whatever reason, he was. I guess it's easy to say in retrospect he was looking to prove something because, Stan Lee for years got all the credit.
Right.
Yeah.
That's because Stan Lee was a good huckster.
Right.
He promoted Marvel and himself. Now, he says, you see interviews where he says, and people say that, hey, I talked about Jack, they didn't listen to me.
Right.
Because one of the things that really hurt Jack the most was this radio interview that they did And all it was about Stan Lee and how he creates things. Jack wasn't even mentioned. Steve Ditko wasn't mentioned. Don Heck wasn't mentioned. It's all Stan, as if he was doing the writing and the drawing. So that's one of the reasons why Kirby, who in his mind, he wrote all those books.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you look at the margin notes on the actual art,
That's right.
Stan Lee followed a lot of the dialogue that that Kirby put in. Not all of it.
Right.
This is one of the other things that was breaking point for him. Kirby would draw it a certain way with this dialogue in mind, and Stan Lee would go totally opposite. Doesn't really even fit the images sometimes.
Right.
So when he went there, I think he had this big chip on his shoulder, and for whatever reason, maybe it was because it was the DC characters, DC universe, that he most of his stuff wasn't really integrated with the rest of DC.
Absolutely. It was really, I think it goes back to the Inhumans. You remember his creation of those in the Fantastic Four. They became his signature piece. He worked for a long time to try and get the Inhumans their spot, and they was always turned down over and over and over again. And that was kind of like it's like the Silver Surfer. That was his thing. He created it. He believed in it. He thought they should be more preeminent, but they never did. And it was that type of a character, that very odd, weird, almost pulpy character, that he tried to create at DC. If you think about many of the New Gods, that's
New Gods is what he wanted to do in Thor.
That's right.
But they wouldn't let him. Because honestly, I don't blame them, because he wanted to basically kill off all the old gods, come up with the new gods.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the first issue of the New Gods is killing off the old gods.
That's right.
Including Odin and Thor, the different version in the DC universe. So, anyways, he just didn't do as well. But I wonder if it's because it was the time of his life that he was in that he didn't do as well. Because, like I said, much of the dialogue that was on those pages is what the story was. And, Stan Lee would give him an idea, and he would do most of the work.
That's right. And maybe there's where the power of the partnership really was. Stan was the idea and the concept man, but he was not the execution man.
He wasn't even necessarily the idea and the concept man.
Well,
because they would talk stuff.
Right, yeah.
Not always. Like something like Galactus.
Right.
That was, hey, Jack, why don't they fight God? Because we've done all this other stuff.
Well, but then again, that's kind of what I'm talking about here.
But I mean, that's
the
not
big picture. Stan can
plot.
do. No, not at all.
It's not even a concept.
Yeah, but it's an idea, and perhaps his ideas worked.
Well, I don't think they work without Kirby.
Oh, no question. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is in the execution.
That gets me to the place that I was hoping to go is, look, everybody reveres Stan Lee. But Stan could suck all the oxygen out of a room.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He is a good salesman. He is a good huckster.
Uh-huh.
He is undoubtedly important and influential.
Oh, absolutely.
That's right. I mean, so I'm not looking to knock Stan down a peg here.
No.
But I do want to try to bring Kirby up a peg.
It was a partnership
to Stan's level.
The magic they did
again,
in creating the Marvel Universe, neither of them by themselves ever achieved that height again. They did great stuff. Fantastic stuff. The mature Kirby is some of the best art you'll see. Some of those things he did at Marvel and DC in the 70s, that is spectacular.
Yeah.
Because he's doing it all he's inking it himself. And when
No.
Well, not always, but sometimes.
No, Mike Royer did most of the inking.
Yeah, but
in the 70s.
Nevertheless, this is
especially at Marvel.
Well, yeah, but at DC he's doing most of his inking himself, I believe. Now, I may be wrong.
So.
Well, it's still Jack. It's as pure a Jack as you're going to get.
Well, that's because it's under his total control.
That's correct, and I think that's where I'm going with this.
Well, except the Superman faces.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. Is
DC had to have somebody redraw
Jack
faces.
is able to do whatever Jack wants. Now, if he has some help, of course. I don't want to minimize the contributions of others, but for whatever reason, they didn't have the magic.
Well, I think part of the problem with Kirby in the 70s is that because he wanted to go off and do his own thing, he wasn't tied into what he and Stan Lee had built, what really to a degree that DC had already built, because DC had, they had the big three.
Right.
They had Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. They were the constant from the 40s on.
Right.
And they had a universe that was fairly integrated, not, with all the crossovers and stuff like Marvel had. They weren't that shared universe to the same degree as Marvel until later.
Yeah, Justice League was about the only exception to that for them.
But
that
even
was,
then, that didn't really impact the individual books.
No, not much at all.
So when Kirby was doing all that great stuff, it wasn't tied into the rest of DC that much.
That's right.
And when he came back to Marvel, you wouldn't have known that Captain America and the Falcon was even part of the rest of the Marvel universe
when he's doing it.
He's doing it. Machine Man, Devil Dinosaur, love those books.
So
Machine Man was fun stuff.
2001
Machine Man was great.
Yeah,
Well, 2001. That's an adaptation.
Well, it was, but the actual series itself was pretty much Kirby doing whatever he wanted to with concept.
Well, and really, what else are you going to do with it?
Well, exactly.
So, and probably there's only so much he could do with that without going off on his own. But he didn't do a whole lot in the rest of the continuity. But if you look at the 60s, when they were at the height,
Right.
that's what made the books so great.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe so great. It's all tied together.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that was Marvel's unique contribution to the comic industry was the shared universe. DC played with it, but never ever
Not to the degree.
never did it ever reach the potentiality.
DC
That's
wouldn't
much
even
later.
use the real names of cities.
Right.
part of
They
it.
made up towns that ever and Marvel.
Metropolis,
Yeah,
Gotham.
That's right.
You know, what was it? Star City.
Star
Star
City,
City,
Coast City.
Coast City.
Yeah, that's right.
You
Midway
know.
City, Hub City. We can keep going. There's lots of them.
But I mean, I think you're hitting a huge part of this for me again. Is if you're not familiar with all this, guys, and you go to an MCU movie, keep in mind what you're seeing. People are telling you it's Stan Lee. What you're seeing is Jack Kirby.
Yes, visually.
Yeah, what you're seeing, yeah.
You know,
Now-
the motion, the
That's right.
the way the
Now,
characters
not all Jack
move.
Kirby, because I'll tell you this. Ditko, he heavily influenced the Doctor Strange movie. It was all Ditko.
That's correct.
When they
But
went to the Dark Dimension, that was so Kirby.
Because Kirby was not involved.
so Ditko, I mean.
Kirby was not involved in Doctor Strange. It's one of the few books.
Yeah, that would be one of the few that.
And
he's
Spider-Man
never
too. Now
Spider-Man.
he had some role in the Genesis, but ultimately it was Ditko from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that we kind of forget.
Yeah,
Kirby didn't do
the-
everything.
The MCU Spider-Man, the Tom Holland Spider-Man, is much more. Not even a Ditko. That's the
It's a Romita?
rubbery.
Well, yeah, it's
That's
probably more of
more
a John
of a-
Romita.
yeah, I would say that's about right.
But even Don Heck with Iron Man and the Avengers after Kirby leaves, a lot of the characters you see in
Yeah.
the Marvel Cinematic Universe
Well,
are also Don Heck.
That's right. Hawkeye is Don Heck.
So is the Black Widow.
As well as Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
Scarlet Witch and Quick. Well, no, those are Kirby.
That's correct because it was in the X-Men first.
Yes.
But they really
they
came
came
to
into their
prominence
own in prominence under Heck.
under Heck. Yeah,
Yes.
with the Avengers.
The Vision, John Buscema.
Absolutely, there's no question he is the guy that did that.
But still, I mean, Kirby laid out the foundation of all of this stuff.
like a visual language for how the director should approach this material.
Yes,
Especially action sequences.
And
the
part of
action
that-
sequences are Kirby.
That's,
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
correct.
It's
Part of this is playing on the legacy that the fan base knows. It's
Yes.
a language that we get. And we're trying to they're trying to translate that known language into a broader audience. And they recognize they have to bring the fans along with that. If you go too far afield, you risk alienating the fans, which is why the television series in the 70s that Stan brought in looked nothing like the comics, and that's why they failed.
well, the Hulk was very popular.
But Hulk was able
It
to
still was not the comic.
I don't know, but they were able to translate it in a new way that resonated with viewers.
yes,
But it was not a superhero. It was more of a drama,
yeah.
and but that was what the 70s needed at the
it
time.
was a walk the earth kung fu fusion.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's
It was
why
that same
it had
plane.
5 seasons. You know,
Yeah.
Part of that is Bill Bixby.
Yes.
He was very good at it. It was mostly him. He was executive producer, I believe, at the end of it.
Yes.
and that had a lot to do with it. That he was able to sell it well.
So the visuals, Stan has nothing about the visuals because the words only do so much.
Right.
And let's face it, we all know he was over the top. But Kirby by himself was kind of over the top with his words too.
Oh yeah.
Just in a different way.
Well, yes.
But the visuals of not just Kirby, but all these other guys, they play so much. Like if you look at Doctor Strange in the movie, he's so Ditko. Okay?
Yes.
And if you
And
look
that was
at all
very
of this
deliberate.
stuff, I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe directors have done so much to bring the essence of the for the visuals.
Right.
of
Black
the originals.
Panther is an excellent example because
Yes.
Kirby creates Wakanda. He creates the Black Panther. Now, Stan gets some credit because he wrote the actual book, but everything that we know about the Black Panther, there's a reason that when Kirby came back to Marvel in the late 70s, he did the Black Panther book. He considered that his.
Yes,
And
Jack wasn't allowed to do the Silver Surfer.
That's right.
Stan Lee decided that was his.
That's right. And that was never an easy thing for them because Kirby really claimed most of the credit for that creation.
No, he gets all the credit.
But exactly. I'm
Because
just saying
when that came back, Lee was literally, who is this guy? He had no idea what was going on there.
Right.
Silver Surfer is a creation of Kirby. Now, he was fleshed out by Stan Lee.
Of course, exactly. There's, the partnership did have, it was always a partnership to a certain extent. But it may be 10% 90 sometimes, or even reversed occasionally. I don't know.
In the latter stages, it was probably more so Stan Lee because there's a point about 2-3 years before the end of his time at Marvel, he stopped creating new characters.
Right. Well, he thought he had maxed out what they could do.
No.
No?
He wasn't giving Marvel any more new stuff. That's what it
Oh,
was.
you mean Kirby?
Yes, Kirby.
Oh, I thought you were talking Stan.
No, see, that's the thing. Stan didn't do a whole lot of individual character creation.
Right. And that kind of stopped at a certain point.
So, well, I mean, no, ever. I mean, like, even the X-Men, the Avengers, it doesn't matter. A lot of that stuff, there's a lot to, yes, okay, we're going to do, certain things. This is the concept. But because it's a visual medium,
Right.
there's only so much that Lee does. I mean, I think more, and again, this is not a slam against him. I think he's better at the fleshing out of the character,
Right.
giving it the angst and the drama.
That's very much Lee.
That's
is correct.
Stan.
But yeah, that's character, but that's not visual.
But the design, the look,
Right. Well, X-Men is a great example because they were created as a group. They look like a group. They wear the same uniforms, for goodness sakes. Whereas the Avengers was really almost meant as a dumping ground. We've got these characters that don't sustain, that may not sustain.
That was directly the Justice League.
That's
equivalent.
correct. They're saying we've got all these characters that have to be in a shared universe more tightly than we're doing with crossovers, which was not much. And also, they've got the character of the Hulk that couldn't sustain his own book. So that's why they brought him in at first, and then they kind of decided, well, maybe not. Because the way they write that character almost as a force of nature at the time.
Well, that's the funny thing. Well. He was far more intelligent that first couple of years.
Right. But I think they realized that sells better when he's the green monster that's beating things up.
I don't know if that's that just may be a more confirmation bias.
That's right.
Because he's a monster.
That's correct. And Stan wrote most of those, did he not? You'll remember Tales to Astonish, when the Hulk comes back as in his own book. Herb Trimpe was drawing it. Not at first.
No, Trimpe is doing it. I think it's Roy Thomas.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, you're right, exactly right. Who is basically Stan Jr. in many ways.
But before that, when he's in Tales to Astonish, I think it is Stan. Because I think that's too early to be Roy Thomas.
I think so, too. That's why
It might be Larry Lieber, his brother.
That's possible.
He's the other major writer, because he was really, those are the only two. And Larry Lieber only got work because he was Stan's brother.
Right.
Matter of fact, Larry Lieber, he was also an artist at times.
Right. Well,
he does a lot of the early work on Thor.
Absolutely.
It's not Kirby from the first issue on to the end.
That's right.
A lot of people don't realize that until you start looking at the credits.
Right.
But still, Kirby did the look.
Larry Lieber didn't look that different from Kirby.
No, because Thor was not the big muscle-bound guy that we think of now initially.
That's Kirby, absolutely. And the entire Asgardian pantheon that is brought in, that's Kirby.
When you see that, it's Kirby.
And that, I think, is possibly the watershed moments we're looking for when Kirby decides he can actually do it his way. He's able... Fantastic Four has some of that, where he's able to branch out, but he's creating characters within the Fantastic Four.
Oh, yes.
And
from the 30s through the 50s... It's the greatest and really even into the 60s is the greatest explosion of characters at Marvel ever.
That's right.
So many greats come out of that 2-year run of the Fantastic Four. It is phenomenal.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal. It's unequaled. Right. Unequaled.
Yeah, we're talking the 30s and 40s of the issues of the book, not the years, not the decades. And it's right. Well, Black Panther is a good example. The Inhumans are a good example. So many of the characters that we've seen in the Marvel Universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Kree. That's the Sentry.
It's a
Fantastic Four Kirby creation, Wakanda, all these things that there's so much fertile ground that we've taken here, and most of it, not all of it, but most of it is Kirby.
So, right, because movies like comic books are a visual medium.
Correct.
And so
that's why they get it right.
To stress, it's the way the characters look.
Yes.
It's again the costuming.
Iron Man aside, because they did a modern version of that.
Yeah.
But it's still that red and gold look.
That's great.
Although that was a Ditko thing.
It was, but that's okay.
No, I'm just saying that one wasn't Kirby.
Yeah, the costuming of the Asgardians, but also again the way characters move in the film.
Endgame is a great example of this.
Yes.
The final fight with Thor and Cap and Thanos. That is so Kirby.
Yeah.
Cap picking up the hammer, which to me is the greatest moment
That's
in
correct.
the entire cinematic universe that they have created.
And they brilliantly laid the
everybody
groundwork.
was waiting for it.
Right.
When he first nudged it in the one Avengers movie, and Thor
Ultron.
had that worried look on his face.
That's right. And you just say, did he? Did he not? What's going on here?
And then
They
you
paid it off.
realize he decided not to. It
right.
had because he just not casually, but he just picks it up. And that was I wonder if I can.
No, it was
he
knew.
knows he can.
That's correct.
And that fight, the way it was choreographed,
Well,
it was so
and they
Kirby.
nailed the character so effectively, and that's one of
Yes.
the reasons that this works so well.
Yeah.
And you speak of Age of Ultron, it was very, very Kirby. Not just Kirby, but a lot of Buscema too, because the fight scene at the end where they're all fighting against Ultron.
Yes, around the whole thing. That was one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen
correct.
in a movie.
That's
up until Endgame.
That's right, and that's very Kirby. Yeah. That's very. We're going to show all this stuff in one. It's not just Kirby. Jim Steranko is famous for those great big things like that, and I think it steals a lot from John Buscema, who was drawing Avengers during the time Division was created, and you expanded the roster a lot. I'm thinking of the time where the Avengers fought the X-Men.
Yes,
in there. There's a lot of that going on in there.
That might have still been Heck.
No, this is a little bit later.
Okay. Yes, I know the time you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the crossover between the X-Men book, which was not drawn by Neil Adams at the time. I forget who was
Werner
doing
Roth.
There you go. And Marvel Triple Action did a really nice reprint where they inserted that in there, and it was brilliant. It was some of the best stuff that was ever done. And I don't remember who it was that was inking Buscema at the time, but it was a
I'd have to look that one.
It's a beautiful palette, and I saw that in that layout.
Yeah.
It's
again, for those of you, if you're just going to these MCU movies because everybody else is, and you're not huge into the source material, you've got to go look at Kirby artwork.
That's right. It's the visual that you should go for.
Now understand what you're seeing. Again, it's more than just the costumes. It's the action. It's even some of the ideas of, again, the Rainbow Bridge and the tunnels between worlds. All that's all Kirby stuff.
Right.
It's all his creativity, all his imagination.
And they have done their best to translate that color palette from the comic books into the Marvel Universe. Gone are the days when, in the first X-Men movie, when Wolverine says, what am I wearing this for? He says, what do you want, yellow spandex? Which is kind of like in your face on that. But Marvel says, no, we can do this sort of thing. And we can do it
It's not garish.
Not at all.
Because, there are still a lot
very
of
natural.
comic costumes that are not going to look good on the big screen.
That's right.
That yellow costume of Wolverine's would look stupid on the big
Absolutely.
screen.
We never were. Well, Scarlet Witch is a great example. Don't
Yes
you
and
wish?
no.
Don't you wish?
Yes, I do.
That.
Yes, I
we
do.
all wish this.
But I think that she's good for who she is, and she does a great job with the character. But she's not my first choice.
Well, they've used her a lot,
look.
and I like that. And I think that's.
Well, she was very young initially, so
exactly.
in the comics, so that plays right.
But she does a great job.
To me, I guess the problem with her is that there's not enough of an homage at all to her character in the comics. Visually,
Endgame helped a lot with that, though. I thought their use of the Scarlet Witch in Endgame was probably the best. They've used her very well up to this point.
Yes,
but that was amazing. They brought her in as she is probably the most badass of all, if she's given the opportunity to evolve
if they would
to
develop
that point.
Her powers like they do in the comic, yes,
that's great. And we got a seeming of that during Endgame. Whereas she's come a long way from Age of Ultron, where she is basically gun shy, and Hawkeye talks her out.
I tell you what, though, as much as I would wish she had better visuals, That scene where she comes out of that hidey hole.
That's right, and her swings her hands around.
That was excellent cinematography, great storytelling.
That
was
Elizabeth Olsen deserves a lot of credit for that because just the hand gestures she does could have been garish and could have been ridiculous, and they are brilliant. And I don't know how much of that is Joss Whedon's direction, but wow,
she pulls it off.
She pulls it off.
Yeah.
That's right. She deserves credit for that.
Yeah. Do you think they're heading towards maybe a standalone for that character?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if she's got the gravitas.
She and Paul Bettany are going to be doing a TV series.
Oh, that's right. They are doing a Vision and Scarlet Witch.
They did Scarlet Witch, and we're still not sure exactly what it's going to look like. They had great chemistry.
They did.
And Paul Bettany...
How they pulled that off, because that is a fanboy's dream, because if you look back into the Avengers, they do get together. I didn't think you could pull that off with an android and a person. But they nail it. They absolutely nail it, and I don't know how, if it was deliberate. I mean, obviously it was deliberate, but how they were able to pull it off in such a completely believable fashion.
That's one of those things that is what makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe so great.
Yes,
because it is one of those things that gives a little nod to what's in the comics without having to be slavish to it.
Correct.
And they don't disrespect it.
That's right.
Unlike what
it felt very natural.
Yes.
Well, that's right, because the writings that it's taken from were good.
Yes.
To begin with, and they recognize, there's good here. We have to adapt a little bit,
and that's
but we're never going to disrespect the source material.
And that's the problem with the DC movies and with the X-Men movies.
Yes.
They do not give enough respect to the source material.
Yeah, Dark Phoenix was an absolute disaster.
I disagree.
Critically.
Critically.
Correct.
I enjoyed the hell out of the movie because I thought they finally did the Dark Phoenix story close enough to the original material. I thought they gave some nods to the original material pretty well. My only complaint was I would have liked to have seen the Phoenix effect earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
That was my only complaint about it because I tried to enjoy it for what it was.
Right.
But I had very very low bar to be hurdled because the first time they did this story was in the third X-Men movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sucked. You didn't even know it was Dark Phoenix unless you were a fan.
Right.
And everybody hated it.
In other words, they disrespected the source material?
They disrespected the sourse material. Batman, Superman, they disrespect the source material.
Right.
Superman especially. He could have saved his father.
Absolutely. That to me, that's Zack. I lay a lot of the failure at Zack Snyder's feet.
We hit that.
We've hit that before.
Yeah.
And I think that...
Only Wonder Woman got it right.
Well, and it was Zack Snyder. But I think DC deserves really the blame because you can get away with having him have his vision once and it didn't go as well as it should. The criticism that was laid on Man of Steel was very clear. That's when they should have said, Zack, we're going to go in a different direction. Because DC's not afraid to do that. They do that shit all the time.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they didn't. They thought, well, he's got gritty down and dark and angsty. Because we want to reproduce the Nolan trilogy. You don't need that. You don't want that.
No, honestly, the
DC universe is bigger than that.
And the interesting thing is, Kirby has a lot to do with the Justice League.
That's correct.
Because the whole Steppenwolf and all of that's Kirby.
Absolutely.
That's New Gods.
That's right. Darkseid, which was supposed to be the ultimate big bad. DC didn't have that until Kirby brought it and created it. It didn't have a big bad.
Enough, Marvel has Darkseid because Thanos is the Marvel version of Darkseid.
That's right. And that's Jim Starlin.
Yeah. But the ironic thing is, Marvel does him better.
That's right. Absolutely.
Which is very sad.
Yeah, because you need a big bad.
You do.
And in the absence of my favorite villain, Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, who still is... That's right, absolutely. Still is the gold standard. That's what he's called. If they get him right, him and Richards, that relationship right, they'll do a good Fantastic Four movie. Until they can get him right, it's not going to happen.
So, guys, I think we achieved what I was hoping for here.
Yes, because we're past time.
Yeah, we oh, man. We
go for hours on this one.
Yeah,
Amen.
We gave Kirby his just due here.
I like to think so.
Without, I don't think we didn't knock Stan down a peg.
No.
Stan, I tell you what, there is a huge thing in the Facebook groups and other places on the internet. The pro Kirby groups and the pro Stan Lee groups, and you can't let the two of them mix.
No.
because it's like modern politics.
Right.
I'm serious.
They cannot conceive of the two living together side by side in harmony.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet that's
Yeah.
when they were the best.
Exactly.
Great things often have more than one parent.
Well,
Yes.
as Trevor Slattery says in Iron Man 3, hey, it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. Oh, and a nice speedboat too.
But again, listeners, if you're not into this source material, what was that website?
KirbyMuseum.org, I believe it is.
You've got to go there. You've got to see the art. Again, as a young kid, I was like, I don't even like that. I don't
It's
get this.
different.
It's so
very
different. It's so unusual.
But once you really get
Right.
to paying attention and you look at the detail and you say, wait a minute.
You look at the flow.
That the flow.
You look at the story.
And the concept.
'Cause what-
And the originality.
Well, see, that's the thing. Younger people are not going to see the originality. They're going to have a harder time with it.
Well, that's correct.
because none of it's new to them.
That's
Yeah.
right. Because it has become the standard now.
Yeah.
But here's, what's the? I don't know much about art, but I know what I like.
Yeah.
Pornography is usually what that
Yeah.
means. I don't know what pornography is, but I know when I see it.
Yeah.
But I'm a Van Gogh guy.
Love Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, what Van Gogh does is capture motion. When you see a Van Gogh painting, what you're seeing is not trees and grass. You're seeing what the wind does to trees and grass.
Yes.
It captures it like no one else.
That's right.
Starry Night is a great example of that.
Yes.
The Doctor Who episode, Amy and the Doctor,
Yep.
Yes.
Vincent and the Doctor. I mean.
Right.
It is where they go and they visit Vincent Van Gogh.
Right.
And at the end, they're lying on a hill, and he's looking up. He's explaining what he sees, and you see the sky come alive like Starry
Yes.
Night. And that was I thought it was great because it really captured the essence of what Van Gogh was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about the forces and the motion in play in the picture that you're
in a
seeing.
static picture.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
For me, that's Kirby
You
with comic books.
You
And
insert dynamism
the
by what is by
dynamism.
definition static.
Yeah.
that movement.
And it's the
in
irony of
The
Yeah.
energy.
the impossibility of the
this
two
little
living
2x2
together.
frame in 4 colors or 3 colors or whatever. But there's this energy, dynamism, movement. It's pretty tremendous stuff. And
It is.
again, the whole MCU, the look, and a lot of the imagination and the idea of Wakanda and Asgard. Again,
All of that stuff is from the 60s. Every
all-
bit. Even
yeah.
Captain Marvel
Yes.
is rooted in the 60s because
Yes.
the original Marvel version of Captain Marvel was a Gene Colan Stan Lee, and that was done in the very late 60s, I think 67
Yeah,
when it first
it
premiered.
was the first of the new books they put out.
Yes.
Because we figured
Yeah.
this out not that long ago.
Yes.
That they reached a point where they're kind of, I guess you would reach saturation with new stuff. They wouldn't add new books for a
They
while.
couldn't.
They couldn't. That's correct. And one of the few that came out was Captain Marvel. Part of it was to take the trademark.
Yes.
But ultimately, it was a very different, although the Marvel Universe does show it because the costumes that Carol Danvers has as a Kree warrior and Jan Rog and all the rest of them as warriors, that is an homage to that original costume that was created.
Some of it is,
But
a good deal of it is also an homage to the second costume
That's
that
correct.
Marvel wore.
It is a blur. It is an attempt because
her costume, when it becomes the red and blue, it's very much the modern
Correct.
costume, but that also is an homage back to the original costume that she wore as Ms. Marvel.
right. So as we said before several times, it's complicated.
It's complicated.
But it's just, I want to stress that to people that there's a source for all of that stuff, and it's Kirby. Go back to it, take a look, and
Kirby,
and
it's
appreciate
Ditko,
it.
It's Heck.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's more
Coleman.
than just Stan Lee.
Romita.
It's
Romita
more than
Severin.
just Stan Lee. So,
Yeah.
well, guys, yeah, I mean, we really
We're running a little bit late.
we thwacked that one pretty good too. I love it. I love it. I love
I
it.
could go
love
on
it.
and on about this
Amen.
stuff.
That's right. Hey, we
So-
were mostly talking only the 60s. We have 70s. There's lots of
So-
other stuff to talk about.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.